All right, Dr. E, we are going live here in LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining me today. For everyone out in our LinkedIn community, we are here this whole month of May, really elevating the idea of mental health, mental fitness. And we in particular are talking about how mental health is the new superpower for business professionals. And it is why I'm so grateful to have Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo with me today. You know, Dr. E, or as we belovedly know you, Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo, as we belovedly know you as Dr. E, you are an acclaimed clinical psychologist, transformative keynote speaker on positive psychology, the author of Get Out of the Red Zone, Transform Your Stress to Optimize True Success. And you're here to give us some strategies and tools about how we could really tame our stress so that we could have better relationships at work and at home, so that we could have more grounded peacefulness within ourselves. And let's face it, Dr. E, these tools and strategies are something that we need more than ever. And it is something that I think, as we talk about what does mental fitness mean on a daily basis, we're just going to want to be able to implement this for ourselves, for our teams, in our organizations, and certainly at home. And I'm looking forward to kind of diving a little bit deeper into all of those with you today. So welcome.
Great. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here. Yay for May Mental Health Awareness Month.
Right. And we will continue it beyond May, right? It is not just for a month or a day.
Like Valentine's Day, you want to remember your loved ones, not just a one day. That's right.
That's it. I'd love to start with a little bit of a state of the union of mental health. You know, you have a lot of great data, a lot of science-driven research that you often share with us and the clients you work with, as well as the audiences around the globe that you are speaking to weekly. And what are some of the data points right now that you're seeing? And also highlight for us which ones are, most concerning to you.
All of them? No. So 91% of workers say they experience unmanageable stress. Not just stress. Stress is part of our everyday life. And we're going to talk hopefully a little bit later about good stress versus not so good stress. But 91% of workers say they have unmanageable stress. That means the majority of people with whom you are working, whether you are or not, are dealing with unmanageable stress. And 70% of people say they are burned out. Burned out, in my terminology, means they are living in this psychological red zone. They're so overwhelmed that they really can't function. They can't be productive. They can't think clearly. They can't be the workers, the leaders, the people who they want to be. And then another statistic that I think is really important to share is 86% of workers want their organization to do something more to help them with their mental well-being. And we're talking more than just you can work with a therapist over here. There's a time and place for therapy. I'm a therapist, right? So obviously I believe in the power of therapy. But what we're really lacking in our organizations, in our schools, in our communities is mind skills training, making this beautiful brain work for instead of against you. Because for the majority of people, their minds are actually working against them. That's what's causing the stress. That's what's causing the burnout and really prohibiting people from being their best selves.
So when you talk about 91% are living with unmanageable stress, what does that constitute? What is unmanageable stress?
Stress that they feel like they can't control all the time. So sure, we all experience stress from time to time. We go into the psychological red zone, distress, because something's happening, then we get out. But for these people who have unmanageable stress, it's really hindering their ability to work, to be productive, to be creative, to be able to work at their best. Because when we have unmanageable stress, what happens in our mind? Well, we can only focus on the unmanageable stress, right? It's taking over our thinking. And so that's when we can't focus on our projects. We can't get our work done in an effective way. And this is when engagement plummets at work, because engagement, of course, is that notion of going above and beyond your job, not because you have to, but because you want to, because you're so excited about what you're doing. And when people are experiencing unmanageable stress, that engagement plummets.
What are you seeing from I know you work with a lot of C-suite leaders, top level, high level leaders. What are you hearing from them about their stress levels and how they're managing it?
So it varies. A lot of people at the C-level, top leaders they think that they thrive on stress, right? I need stress. So getting out of the red zone, that's for other people. But what we want to realize is we want the positive stress. We don't want the distress, which is that not so positive stress. So a lot of leaders, one, they aren't noticing it in themselves until they talk to me and they're like, oh yeah, I really am, impacted negatively by this stress. But the other thing is a lot of times when they don't notice it in themselves, they then get frustrated that their team members and those in their organization can't just get over it. And that would be lovely if they could just get over, but not everyone can, because not everyone has the skills of how to do that.
So how much do you think, because there's a whole awareness component, right? We talk about this all the time. It's just having the awareness of it. So for these leaders, first, like you said, them having the awareness in themselves, but then also having the awareness that not everybody on your team thrives on stress, or maybe you need to help them understand, to your point, what's the good stress versus the bad stress. How do you start retraining leaders and their teams to start thinking about this differently and start talking about it differently?
Well, some of it is just having the language. What is the red zone? The red zone is when people experience high levels of distress. Now, we keep talking about good stress versus bad stress. So let's get a little geeky here. So in psychology, we call good stress eustress, spelled EUSTRESS. And that's the positive stress. That's when you're excited about making a change, about overcoming a challenge. You have a goal that you've set, and it's not easy, but it's not overly hard. It's that sweet spot where you're working towards something meaningful to you. That's the kind of stress we want in our lives. That's the kind of stress that allows us to make positive change. Distress is any emotion you don't want. So anger, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, guilt, shame, worry, fear, all of that goes in the distress pile. And distress exists on a continuum from 0, right? No distress at all. You just got off the massage table. Life is great. To 10 out of 10, the most distressed you've ever been. And this concept of the psychological red zone happens when people are at a 7 out of 10 or higher. So a 7, an 8, a 9, or a 10, that's the psychological red zone. And in that red zone, we don't think or act rationally, right? We're using a different part of our brain. We're not using our frontal lobe, which allows us to, engage in executive functioning and problem solving and perspective taking. We're using the limbic system, the fight or flight mechanism. And so when people are in the red zone, they tend to focus on what's wrong. They tend to get stuck in the problems, and they're so focused on the problem that they have trouble figuring out the solution. They tend to feel overwhelmed. And what can happen is people give up. This is where procrastination and avoidance happens. This is where irritability and not so great leadership happens, right? Because we're not thinking clearly in that red zone. So part of it is just understanding where you are as an individual, as a leader, and where your team is. Now, I'll give an example. I was working with a client who's president of an organization, and her CEO is just being a little irritable lately. And so she wasn't sure how to approach him, how to say, stop being kind of a jerk. And so what she did was she just said, hey, I've been working with this coach, and she was teaching me this concept of the red zone. She explained the red zone in a sentence or two. She said within a day, his behavior was different. So just being knowledgeable that, and she wasn't saying you were in the red zone to him, but he was able to see, maybe I'm there. Not only did his behavior change, so he was easier to work with, but they were at a meeting with his direct reports, and he messages my client and says, looks like Jim's in the red zone. So he was able to not only see it in himself, but starting to see it in other people. So that's, just having that language can be powerful.
Oh my gosh, let's talk about that, because this is what I have loved from the first day that we started working with you as well. And as I've been trying to explain, the red zone, talk to agents, talk to meeting planners about you. It is this vocabulary that you are giving us. It is this opportunity for us to depathologize, as you got me, how we talk about this. And if I may share a personal story of how I'm just even using this at home, it used to be that I could, if I turned to my husband or my kids, I wouldn't say it with my kids, but I could turn to my husband and be like, I'm depressed today. Like, I'm just having a bad day. I'm so anxious. And I would just hear those words coming out of my mouth, and I would feel terrible about myself. And I would sit in that. Or, with my kids, mommy's having a bad day. Well, they're learning about this bad day now. And ever since reading the red zone, it's kids, mom's a little in the red zone, just give me 5 minutes. And then I do whatever I need to do, my tools, just kind of get me back and regrouped. But just this past week, I even used it with my 10-year-old for her, right? She woke up and she was just feeling down. And I could have said, why do you look down, babe? Why do you look so sad? These words that I'm sticking in her head, like, I'm a sad girl. I'm sad. I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I didn't say that. I said, oh, looks like someone's in the red zone. Like, you want to talk about it? Or do we want to play some Taylor Swift? Let's go. Like, what are we going to do?
Taylor Swift therapy. I love it.
What do you think? And this is so powerful, Dr. E. And I want to make sure we give it its full time here to just talk about it, because the power of words, we've always known, is key. But just tell me, what are you seeing and hearing? What are you hearing back from audiences? The power of this language, this new vocabulary, this new positioning that you're giving all of us.
Yeah. So because everyone gets in the red zone sometimes, right? So it's not like there's something wrong with you if you're in the red zone. Oh, I'm in the red zone. And it gives us this way of depathologizing, i.e. saying, we're not saying something's wrong, right? It's just, this is where I am right now. And I love what you said about labeling and putting those words in our subconscious, because when kids or even, adults hear I'm anxious, what happens? Without realizing it, they start feeling more anxious. They start thinking in more anxious ways, which causes them to feel more anxious, which causes them to think in more anxious ways. And then that increases that distress and it gets them into that red zone. By saying, I'm in the red zone, let me do something to get out of the red zone. It gives us the power, it gives us the tools that we need to be able to control our stress.
That is so. And are you really seeing it? Like, when you walk off stages, do people mention this to you? Are they hearing this?
Yes. And what is so exciting to me is it's not just when I walk off stage. So I had a call 2 days ago with a group. I speak at an organization every year called the Women's Food Service Forum. And people had seen, there were 4 people on the call. 3 of them, I think, had seen me in past years, not this year. And so they were still talking about the red zone. But what was fun was their executive sponsor for this ERG. He saw me speak like 3 years ago, and they said he uses the language on a daily basis. So it's very sticky. Again, it gives us a way to communicate that doesn't feel like you're telling me something's wrong with me. And it really gives us this power to take control of what's going on up here.
Yeah. And your statistic, going back to the 91% of employees in the organizations want their organizations to do more for them in mental health. It's so interesting because being in the events industry, speaking industry, things go through phases. And then you hear people, meeting planners are like, oh my gosh, we're so done with like mental health. I mean, we need it, but we don't want to talk about it anymore. But yet people are still out there saying we need more. How do you kind of, how do you figure out the way through that, in terms of these events and opportunities to really bring this message deeper?
Well, I think it's really helping people be aware of just how prevalent they are. So it's 86% of people want their organizations to do more for their mental health. And people are leaving their organizations if they aren't getting the support. So it's really key. Not only that, but when we look at the statistics, I mean, $300 billion is lost every single year in the United States alone because of being in the red zone, right? Because of absenteeism, presenteeism, when your team member may be there, but they aren't mentally there, right? Healthcare utilization and turnover. So these are staggering numbers. And the thing is, yes, stress is part of everyday life, but how can you control it so that it doesn't take over your ability to function? That's really the key. And what I find is when people hear the concept of the red zone and they learn the skills of how to get out and stay out of the red zone, it almost becomes like a game for them. They like to figure out, how are they going to do this? How are they going to help other people do this? Because they have the tools. It's not just this, oh, mental health issues, I don't know what to do. It's the red zone. Here's how you get out. It isn't rocket science. It really is rocket science. But what I say is it is rocket fuel. And by that, I mean, rocket fuel will take us from here to the moon. That's how powerful it is. When we can control our mindset, when we can make sure we're not in that red zone, except for when we need it in life and death situations, right? That really is rocket fuel, because that then allows us to be the workers we want to be the team members we want to be the parents, the community members, everything. But we have to get out of that red zone.
And you have a great example also about how teams can use this. You have an example of a manager that used this before a meeting can you share that story with us?
Yeah. So one of the things I love to do after giving a keynote is, for those who are really want to take this to the next level, is we do group coaching. So I hop on a call and basically it's what worked, what didn't work, right? Because sometimes we can hear a great talk and we can think, oh, that changed my life. and then life happens again, right? So I love doing this group coaching. I also have a 21-day program. It's 2.5, 3-minute videos for 21 days just to help solidify these concepts. Anyway, I was on a group coaching call after about a week and a half after I gave a keynote, and the CFO said that once she understood, right, the power of the red zone and the power of getting out of the red zone, before every meeting, she asks people where they are on that scale, including herself, right? And she said she had a really important meeting with her financial analyst. They were going to go over projections for next year. Really important meeting. And her financial analyst was at a 9 out of 10. So she said, I knew he would be no good in this meeting. So she rescheduled the meeting for the next morning. She got him a gift certificate to Grubhub because I would say being hangry will definitely put us in the red zone. And then they met the next day. So what's the message that this leader in the organization is sending? Not just that person, but really, everyone in that organization. Your mental well-being matters. And not only can we work around it, but by taking the steps to address your mental well-being, we're going to be more productive. We're going to be more effective. We're going to be more profitable by doing that.
I love these conversations with you because to me, they're so energizing. Like, I want these kinds of conversations to become the new water cooler talk for people, right? It took years for physical fitness to become something that people share ideas. Well, what do you do for your morning fitness? What do you do with your strength training? What do you do for your meditation? I would love to start seeing mental health, right, become the conversation where people are like, what are your strategies, to get out of the red zone? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Are you seeing that coming? Is that already here?
I am. And I'm actually working with an organization right now. One of the items on their assessment for each team member, they have, they all decide one thing that they're going to do for themselves to stay out of the red zone. So for some people, it's exercise or meditation or, learning a new skill, whatever it is. But it's actually part of their performance review. So if it's, I'm going to start exercising, 3 times a week, it's part of their performance review. And they are actually getting assessed on that because this organization understands that by doing that and having people figure out what works for them, because for some people, exercise is great. For some people, meditation is great. For some people, meditation actually puts them in the red zone, right? So you want to figure out what works for you. But this organization knows that not only is this going to help their psychological well-being, but it's going to help the health of the organization itself.
Oh, I love that. That is music to my ears. That's amazing to hear people stepping up to the plate. I also want to recognize these are difficult conversations. We're not saying that organizations boo on you, you're not doing enough. We know this is hard. We know HR leaders have struggled and gone through a lot, but this is why these kinds of programs and opportunities to bring people in like you, like the speakers who have, again, the workshops, the keynotes that really dive deeper and give the tools and strategies. This is what's so important. And speaking of what's important, I want to kind of, shift a little bit to the younger minds in the world, because we are so fortunate that you also have a company called Elevive. Can you share with us about that and what that does, how you help teens and talk through some of that with us?
Yeah. So Elevive stands for Elevate Your Mindset, Thrive in Life. And it really was born, I've always done sports psychology. I used to be a physical therapist. Now I'm a psychologist. So sports psychology made sense for me. But I started realizing that more than just athletes need some help. And it was interesting. I was working with a golfer and I gave him a technique. His putting was not going very well. So I gave him a mind skills technique to use. And he came back the next session. He's like, oh my gosh, it was great. It totally worked. And then you could see his brain working. And he said, wait, could I use this when I'm stressed out about a test too? And I'm like, yes, that's exactly it. So I opened it up to teens and tweens. And I don't think I've told you this, Marjana. Starting Tuesday, I think we started last Tuesday, yesterday, we are going to have Tween Tuesday. So every Tuesday on LinkedIn, we are going to share some bit of information, skill. If you have a teen or tween, it works for youngers and olders too, but that's, the rhyme there, of really how to help our young people. Because one of the things, inevitably, when I go into organizations and I talk about the red zone and how to apply it, inevitably someone will ask the question about how can I help my kids with this? And in fact, I just got some feedback from a talk 2 weeks ago where what they wanted was, I have a bunch of videos and resources for parents and for kids. And that was the follow-up that they wanted. They wanted this because so many teens are struggling just struggling. 80% of teens say that they are struggling with stress. 67% of teens say they pretend to be better than they really are because they don't want their parents or loved ones to worry about them. So even if you think your teen is doing fine, I assure you they may very well be struggling and they just don't want you to worry about it. And then another statistic that I find staggering is 70% of teens and tweens want their schools to be giving them coping skills, right? To be helping them with their mental well-being. And most schools don't. They often have a social worker who is overworked, right? And so what do teens do? They get on social media. Probably not where we want kids to be learning how to deal with their mental well-being, because people prey on this. I mean, a lot of kids, when they look up how to help mental health, they learn how to cut, self-cutting, injuring themselves, because that is a coping mechanism. It's not a healthy one, but for a lot of kids, they're cutting. The last stat I saw was 19% of young people are cutting. 19%. And I'm going to guess that's probably a little low. They learn how to cut by experiencing that physical pain. They don't feel the emotional pain. They learn how to cut in places where you can't see, where they hide it from parents. And so, that's not what we want our kids to be learning. So these concepts of the red zone work with our young people too. I mean, I have two teens now, 16 and 18. And in our household, we talk about the red zone. We talk about, I'll say I'm in the red zone. I need a break. My kids will too. If I get snippy with my kids, happened just a couple of days ago with my oldest, she's in college, and I was just frustrated. And I came back to her later and I said, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I was not being as respectful to you as I want to be. I was in the red zone. Now, I could have said it was your fault because you were X, Y, and Z, but I am in charge of my own behavior. And as parents, as leaders, whether it's with parents, with children or not, as leaders, if we can take accountability and be like, you know what? I was snippy with you. I full-heartedly apologize. I was in the red zone. I need to take the steps to get out of the red zone and not treat you like that. That's a vulnerable position to be in that is going to be so powerful. Again, whether it's your team, whether it's your partner, whether it's your kids, or whether it's your neighbors.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so important, right? Because we know whatever we're facing at home, and certainly if we're concerned about our children at home, that is following us to work. That is going to affect our productivity, presenteeism, and all those aspects. So I think this work you're doing in that space is so important. When you talk about schools, whether it's universities or even at the high school levels, middle school, I have things in my middle school that are going on where I'm like, we need to check that a little bit. What are we going to do? What can we do as parents to share this message with school leaders at whichever level we're looking at it?
Well, if they go to ellevive.com and go to their three components, but I think it's the mental health one, there are resources there. So there's resources for kids, there's resources for parents. So, I mean, for example, I did not do the animated videos, but I commissioned someone to create animated videos to be able to talk about this in a way that is easy to understand, and just presenting this concept to your children about the red zone. Where are you? How can you get out and stay out of that red zone? That gives them power, because one of the things I hear over and over again from my young people, and frankly, from my adults too, is I thought there was something wrong with me. I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was the only one. Right? There's nothing wrong with you. This is the way our brains are made, right? You're not going crazy, even though it may feel like it. That's red zone. And there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, why would you ever know about the red zone or be able to get out of the red zone if you haven't learned it, right? It's just a skill. I had it, my grandmother, she was a funny old woman. She was an incredible piano player. And even though she never graduated from university, she taught a college course that she called How to Play the Piano Despite Years of Practice, right? How to play the piano despite years of practice. So she'd work with her, and these were adults. She'd work with her students, and she'd watch them play, and she'd help them get rid of the skills and techniques they were using that weren't very good habits. She taught them the correct skills and techniques, and then they practice. And if you get rid of what doesn't work, you learn what does work, and you practice that, it's impossible not to get better. Impossible. So I like to think I help people get out of the red zone despite years of practice, because we've all been trying to get out of this red zone for as long as, we can probably remember, but maybe we've developed some habits, some skills that really aren't working. And the beauty is this is based in research, right? This is neuroscience research. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, the most empirically supported, research supported treatment out there. And so we know from the research it works. I know from doing this in my personal life it works. I know from working with clients for well over 25 years this works. I see it every day. And so if we can get rid of, for our kids, for ourselves, for our team members, if we can get rid of what isn't working for them and help them learn what does work and help them practice that, we can't help but help people get out of this red zone. It's impossible not to.
Oh, I love it. And listen, I know you brought this message to a lot of national shows as well. You've been on Good Morning America multiple times, the doctors, what are you finding after having those conversations there as well?
So I have done a lot of media on this, and I'll tell you a funny story about it. People are always interested. People come up to me after and they ask questions. But last time I was on Good Morning America, I was talking about, I think we were talking about, I can't remember what we were talking about.
The new year. Was it the new year?
Yeah, I think it was the new year. And I had already been on Good Morning America and Today Show when the book first came out. So the producer said, we'll show the book, we'll reference the book, but we're not talking about get out of the red zone because we already talked about that. Totally fine. So during the interview, live television, the people who are interviewing me, the host asks me about the red zone and then asks me about how to apply it with her kids. So even though I was told not to talk about it, they were so interested in it and they really wanted to get this information for themselves and for their children. So what am I finding? That people personally, this message really resonates with them. And again, it's so applicable, even if I can't say it. And it's so easy to apply once we learn those skills.
So good. So good. Well, listen, I want to be mindful of your time, but before we go, I always love to ask, what do you see on the horizon and what excites you about the future of mental health in leadership in our organizations for us as individuals?
What excites me about mental health in the present and future is that we're talking about it, right? I mean, think about it. When people think of mental health, they tend to go to pathology, depression, anxiety. And yet when you think about physical health, what did you just say? You talked, people are talking about running and meditating, getting their sleep. So what I think is going to happen is we're going to realize it's not just about depression and anxiety and those people over there. If you have a body, you have physical health. If you have a mind, you have mental health, right? And so realizing the importance of this and how when we can get this right, not only does it help our team members and employees be happier and more psychologically healthy, but the return on investment is truly incredible. So addressing mental health, for every dollar that goes in, there's a $5 return on investment. That's huge, right? We know that when people are in the green zone, when they're happier, Harvard research shows that they have a 31% increase in productivity and a 37% increase in sales. So just think about what that would mean for an individual, for a team, for an organization to have across the board, 31% increase in productivity and 37% increase in sales, right? This isn't just, oh, that's nice. There's a bottom line here that's being positively impacted. And once we realize the importance of this, once we realize it's not soft skills, it's absolutely vital skills that lead to hard results, people are going to get on board and realizing it's more than just you have this number of sessions with a psychiatrist or this number of sessions with a therapist. Again, time and place for that. I'm a therapist, so I believe in therapy. What people really need are these skills, and they are just skills. We can teach the skills easily. Once they get them, they have them, not just for now, but forever. It's like riding a bike, right? Once you have that skill, even if you don't need it for a couple of years, you still have it. So giving our team members these skills is really where I see the future of mental well-being going.
I love it. And then, finally, just for any agents, meeting planners watching this, learning from you on this, what are some of the ways in which that you bring this to audiences?
Yeah, so right now we have two main keynotes. Everything's customizable, of course, but one is for team members, getting out of the red zone, helping them understand what are the signs that they're in the red zone, because how many of us have ever said something or done something we later regretted? It's probably because we were in the red zone. And if we know that, I would say when you're in the red zone, don't let anything out of your mouth, because that's when we say things we later regret. and don't put anything in your mouth, because that's when we consume things we later regret. So for team members, understanding the concept of the red zone and what are the tools that, regardless of what's going on, to get out of that red zone. And then I have one for leaders, because a lot of times what I'm hearing from leaders is, I thrive with stress, right? I need stress. It's those other people who can't handle stress. But you don't thrive on distress. No one thrives on distress. We thrive on eustress, that positive stress. So what I'm helping leaders do is to understand what's the difference. You want to be high on eustress, the positive stress, and low on distress. That's the green zone. A lot of leaders are high on eustress. They're excited to make a positive change. They're also high on distress. So we call that the yellow zone, right? That's that kind of manic. I'm doing okay until something goes wrong, and then I'm going to lash out, and then I'm going to drop the ball on something, because when we're in that red zone, we don't think clearly. So for leaders, it's really about how to optimize your stress and how to help your team do that too.
I love that. And I know you do it in all sorts of different modalities, and you have the workshops and you have the video series. So we are definitely going to share more of that. I'll put some links in below that people can reach out to you directly. But thank you so much for your time, everything you're doing here. I know you and I are talking this month to do a special week-long, opportunity for teens and families. So we'll be offline talking about that and make sure that we bring that to our community as well. But thank you so much for everything, every stage you hit with this, every organization you talk to. It's making a difference. And really, let's make mental health the new superpower for business professionals.
Indeed. Thank you.